Chapter 27. This one is for Alice. I pushed the question aside because there was so much to do. A meal to be made. I suppose you'd call it lupper or linner rather than brunch, because it turned out to be mid-afternoon by the time the three of us ate. We made a bed near the fireplace for the new family and cleaned up the birthing nest. When Dr. Perry and Shadow went to the store to get supplies, I found myself so exhausted that though I intended just to catch my breath, I fell into a sound sleep. Shadow woke me when he returned. Suddenly I realized that I'd been more than 24 hours without a shower, and I tried to make up for it by staying under the streaming water twice as long. I took my time dressing, so hours went by before it was just the two of us, Shadow and me, with time to talk. I found him in the living room, on the floor in front of the fire with Delilah and her kittens. Shadow had added his favorite blanket from his cat life to their nest. I sat on the couch behind them, feeling more than a little left out. Feel better? Shadow asked. I'm clean, I said, truthfully enough. I always liked Dr. Perry, Shadow said. It was good to have an opportunity to be with her again, to talk. It's too bad she didn't know who you are. She was very upset to hear about Shadow's death, I said. His head turned to the right so that I could see his profile. She thinks I died? Well, of course, I said. What would you call it? Death is a human concept, he said. Cats never really die, you see. They just move forward into a new life. Well, Dr. Perry is a human, and as far as I know, so you'll have to forgive her short-sightedness. This was beginning to sound uncomfortably like the last message he'd left on the laptop. I steered away from it. Speaking of new lives, I said, you've been offered a job. Why would I want a job? Well, it's a rather interesting position. I met the man you look like, and he thought you might want to make appearances for him. Talk shows, parties, things like that. He'd pay your travel expenses and more. You could be quite well off. I tried very hard to stop there, to close my mouth and keep it shut. I failed. You might need the money now that you have a family. And so the question I thought was so carefully tucked away in the back of my mind had insinuated itself in the conversation. Shadow turned to me, his legs crossed Indian style. What are you saying? Dr. Perry's right. The gray cat looks just like you, like Shadow the cat. You were supposed to be neutered when I got you, but I never checked either. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you had an extra good time in the park one day. Maybe you had a reason for asking your sister to bring Delilah here. Maybe it had nothing to do with providing me some company. I wanted Delilah to be safe, Shadow said, and her babies. Your babies? With the fire behind him, Shadow's expression wasn't clear, but I could almost feel the annoyance rolling off of him. You're concerned about whether I sired these cats. I was not backing down. Are you saying you had nothing to do with it? That's what you want me to say. The answer is more complicated. My heart sank. I've told you many times how it is with cats, he said, and now the irritation was plain. If I was in the park one day when Delilah came into her time, if I was among those males who fulfilled our obligation as cats, if by chance some of my substance gave shape to one of her kittens, what does that have to do with you? Are you saying I have to learn to share? Delilah has your cat body, and I have your man's version? There is no cat body anymore. Shadow no longer exists in that form. No longer exists? You saw the body after I left it. Mimi tells me there was a final ceremony. This should be no surprise to you. The irritation was gone from his voice. In its place was something very much like regret. But you're here, and you have to be able to turn yourself into a cat. He shook his head. And nearly ruined everything by letting people know what I could do. He sighed, and his head fell to his chest. The earth spirits decided that since I couldn't wait for the proper time to be a man, I must not like being a cat very much. That part of my life is over. I will never take the shape of a cat again. He seemed so sad that I had to point out the positives. But you still have life. He glowered at me. Or do you? You have no heartbeat. I can make one if it's that important to you. My neck hair stood on end. Are you a ghost then? Are you dead? Do I really see you at all, or am I just hoping? How can I be dead? He said. Of course you see me. You feel me. He reached up and touched the side of my face. You know I'm here. Dr. Perry saw you, I was thinking aloud. Do you trust your eyes, her eyes, more than your own? His voice was stern. I don't know. Maybe I do. I'm only human after all. Yes, he said, with the kindest smile and just the smallest trace of condescension. Or maybe it was disappointment. You are very human. Is that so awful? I leaned forward toward him. He opened his arms to me, and I resisted for only the smallest fraction of a second. I suppose you need time, he said, to feel all these human things. Jealousy and anger and worry and relief, but there are so many things to talk about. I've just come home after being away many weeks. I was in great danger. I missed you, and I know you missed me too. All you care about is Delilah's kittens and their possible fathers, when there are so many important things to say between us. With his body close to mine, his breath in my hair, my anxieties did seem like small quibbles. The man of my dreams was here after all, and he was with me. Don't you want to know where I've been? What I've been doing? I hesitated, searching for a way to avoid those questions without hurting his feelings. There was none. I'm not sure, I said, finally. I read the message you left for me, the story about the earth spirits and the cats and your version of history. I don't know if I want to know more about that, because then I'd have to decide whether I believe it. Couldn't we just be together, an ordinary couple doing ordinary things? You could take the job with the actor. We could travel. I'd like to travel. For a few years, maybe. He sighed and pulled back enough so that he could see my face, and I could see his. The disappointment was clear now. All you want is a few years. A few years can be a long time. It depends on how you count time. Humans are the only ones who use years, weeks, days, he said. We could do what you want, but we could do so much more. In my mind's eye, I looked over the cliff and measured the fall. Then I closed my eyes, wrapped my arms around myself, and jumped. Metaphorically, of course. Tell me then, I said. And he did. He told me where he'd been, what had happened there, how he returned to me, what he'd brought me as a gift. It took hours, but I suppose I was the only one counting them. God damn. When he finished, the fire was burned low. The kittens were restless, but Delilah still slept. The little gray cat tottered our way, stumbling blindly, and Shadow let her climb on his arm. I agree with Dr. Perry, he said. This one's for you. I'll feel better when the eyes open, I said, absently stroking her infinitely soft fur. It's more than the eyes, Shadow replied. The eyes open when the soul arrives. His hand caressed my neck and slid into my hair. We don't have much time to decide. A day or two. I suppose it always comes to this. A choice between his family and yours, between the comforts of the past and the possibilities of the future. And yet, what he was asking is too preposterous to repeat. Couldn't I do this later? In a few years, maybe? He shook his head. The little gray cat grabbed my fingers with her little paws and began to gum them. I cupped my free hand underneath her and lifted her close to my face. She began to purr. I'm calling it. She is going to eat this cat.